Whether you want to get into Fate for the dark fantasy battles, they are pretty cool, the waifus, hey, I don't judge, or the lore, my condolences. One thing we can all agree on is it's a mess. It takes hours just to find out which watch route you should go for, and potentially even longer before you start to enjoy it. At least that was my story, and I'm not alone, so today I hope to answer why people chose this dark path and how you can go about it. So let's start with what Fate is about, and as a wise man once said,
imagine history but horny.
And while that is certainly one appeal of Fate, and it has no shortage of great waifus, the core anime adaptation was actually much less horny. Apart from that, and I would dare to say that one big appeal of it was rather its dark fantasy elements. You see, now and again, a Grail War will be announced and mages from all parts of the world, sometimes somehow conveniently geographically located in the same town, of potential participants. Each mage will get a powerful heroic spirit as a servant to aid them in their attempt to conquer the Holy Grail, which if one will grant the winner any wish they desire. And while one might wish that these mages solve such an important matter by civil discourse, to make sure it's used for the right thing, of course this turns into a bloody battle royale. And if you even thought there was a slight chance of empathy, let me tell you that one of the traits of an excellent mage is being cold-blooded. And speaking of mages, every mage is different. They use different schools of spells, from long-range attacks to body enhancement to charging mana into objects. And magic is not just a cool thing, it's heavily cultural in this world. A mage is not just some spell slinger, it's a way of life, being inherited from parent to child. And to quote Tosaka Rin, you are a mage before you are a father. Not to mention how the servants mentioned earlier are divided into 7 different classes, or I guess if you go by Fate Grand Order lore, we are at 15, and each heroic spirit has a noble phantasm, which can be described as their most OP ability. And well, we are still at the tip of the iceberg, and I don't want to spoil too much for you, so let's just say the world building is deep and insanely good. Something else that is insanely good is the characters. I find there to be great depth into each character, which of course plays a big role in the Grail War itself. Both in terms of how much of a mage the master actually is, aka how cold-blooded they are, but also the heroic spirit. You see, contrary to what the name might suggest, not all of them are heroic. For example, in Fate Zero, towards the middle of the first season, the Grail War has to be put on pause because one of the masters has decided that together with their servant, they should ignore the Grail War and just go on a murdering spree. And considering humans can be harvested for mana, and those who have done in the past haven't been punished by the overseers of the game, you can assume the scale of rampage they're going on is pretty big. Now, I could talk about every character in detail and describe what I like about them, but do you realize how much Fate content there is? We would be here all day, and once again, I don't want to spoil you guys. But I do think it's good that there's so much content, or well, it's a double-edged sword. On one hand, if you like Fate, there's plenty to do, but there's obviously also a lot of confusion. Not to mention how different some of these shows are. You see, what I talked about above was based on the anime core trilogy. I guess the standalone Fate Apocryphae also works. If we started talking about Fate Grand Order, we would have to start changing a few things since it's a sci-fi time travel setting, and if we start talking about Fate Prisma Ilya, well, let's just say it's the official magical girl version of Fate. And I feel like this is an appropriate time to get into the watch order. So remember, as we're getting into this, that none of these are connected, or well, kinda. I think this is where it gets confusing, because while it isn't the same timeline, no matter what route you take, you risk spoiling yourself. Unless we talk about standalone work like Fate Apocryphae and Fate Prisma Ilya, which I guess still risks spoiling Fate Grand Order. You know what, let's sort this out once and for all. This is the ways I would recommend to get into Fate. And yes, you heard that right, ways. First of all, the purest route is of course the original visual novel Fate Stay Night, which I haven't read myself considering it's about 100 hours long, but I have heard that if you have the time, it's the best way to get into Fate, and specifically with this route. Fate, Unlimited Blade Works, Heaven's Feel. However, I would argue there's an even more pure and common way to get into Fate. Doujinshis. No joke though, there's so much Rule 34 of Fate that I'm convinced you could build a basic understanding of the lore purely from doujinshis. For example, I already knew that mages supply their servants with mana before picking up my first Fate anime. Of course, that's based on what I heard from friends who read the doujinshis. Speaking of Fate anime, I honestly think the anime route is the best way to get into Fate if you don't want to read the visual novel. Now, the core shows in order is Fate Zero, which is a prequel to the second show Fate Stay Night Unlimited Blade Works, and then lastly we have Fate Stay Night Heaven's Feel. Now, this route is not without its problems, mainly being how these three shows spoil each other, since they're different routes of the same visual novel. Oh, and also that Fate Zero Season 1 is kinda slow. Honestly can't pinpoint why, it's just been a thing that both me and the people I've talked about it with have felt. Now, if you don't feel committed to watch the first season of Fate Zero, you could go straight into Fate Stay Night Unlimited Blade Works, which is amazing and in my opinion takes the Fate experience from Fate Zero and just upgrades it. I wouldn't recommend starting with Heaven's Feel because while I do like it, it does this weird montage in the beginning that will most likely leave you very confused since you won't know what it's referencing. And if you feel like you don't want to commit to a trilogy just yet, another fair option would be to watch Fate Apocrypha. This show takes place in its own timeline and it's just solid and also has the best husbando. However, it is a bit different from other Fate shows in certain ways, like how it's not a free-for-all but a team battle, and also things like... Now there is of course one more way to get into Fate, the darkest path of them all, the gacha game. Fate Grand Order is a game taking place mostly in its own timeline and in your wallet.
700万ぐらいは
While it's completely different from the other Fate shows, it's great if you want to get to know the servants. Not to mention the story is actually quite good. However, if you were to walk this road, hold your wallet closely and accept a life of solitude as your free time won't be going on dates and socializing, but in your bed playing the latest event trying to unlock a 5-star Astolfo. Bullshit!
They ask you how you are, and you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine.
Now, I wouldn't recommend the following shows to get into Fate, but it could be a nice bonus if you already enjoy Fate. First of all, we have the Magical Girls spin-off Fate Ilia Prisma. If magical girls are your thing, hey, I pride my channel on being non-judgmental. Now, I tried to get into it because I'm a Fate fan, and I don't think it's bad, it's just not my thing. And if you like magical girls shows, I bet you could enjoy it. Then we also have a cooking show, which is, well, okay I guess, but you could skip it if... It's 10 out of 10, 100% canon, you have to watch it, trust me bro. They have also timed their episodes to 13 to 14 minutes, making me 100% convinced that they knew that people would be eating to this show. And now that you know what Fate is about and have the watch order, you are ready to set sail. If you decided it's not for you, how about this old video of mine about Toaru? Don't forget to support the channel by sharing this video with a friend. With that said, bye! Men vad är det här för jävla vridning den har fått?